Hello everyone, my name is Tony and my group mates Enrico, Mahir, Santiago and I will talk about High Speed 2. First, let's explain what High Speed 2 is. HS2 is the UK's high-speed rail network that will upgrade the existing rail system and expand its services. The delivery of this program is split into three phases, Phase 1, 2A, and 2B. The program is highly ambitious in its scale and involves many interrelated complex inputs such as buying land and property on and around the route and compensating those affected, and outputs like new high-speed rail infrastructure, constructing a new railway, building 6 new stations, extending Euston and redeveloping Manchester Piccadilly, and introducing passenger services, including 18 trains to and from London, plus 6 trains to and from Birmingham. Usually between 2 and 6 an hour, up to a maximum of 14, run on European high-speed railways. However, initial cost estimates have been wildly inaccurate as changes to the cost of different components become apparent, and the initial target opening date of 2026 has turned into a phased opening pushed back to sometime between 2029 to 2036. So what went wrong? This is what the Now report sought to answer. Because of the proximity in time and the consequences that has on cost estimation and scheduling, this report focuses only on Phase 1 of HS2, which will run between London and the West Midlands. The report examines whether the department and HS2 have protected value for money in their stewardship of the program, and risks to value for money going forward. First, the report discusses progress since 2016 and reports that the department and HS2 have focused on getting ready to start construction on Phase 1. Next, the report investigates why the schedule has been delayed and costs increased. Reasons given include an ambitious opening date, the underestimation of the complexity of the program, failure to account for uncertainty and risk in estimating costs, the impact on the costs of changes by the compensation and accommodation scheme for affected residents, and no change to deliver ambitious savings targets. Lastly, they identify risks that the department and HS2 must manage going forward. There's robust risks that may arise as the program progresses, risks with the commercial approach to main civil construction, delays to the start of construction and the risk to the opening date, need to develop its capability to manage the program as it progresses, and risks to the funding and scheduling of Phase 2. Generally, we can think of the output here as the delivery of Phase 1. The reasons and risks identified by the report are the organizational deficiencies that affect the capacity to generate sound estimates, a crucial input for economically turning money into other inputs, as well as efficiently converting those inputs into outputs on time and within costs. This guides the recommendations that the office puts forward, specifically assuring itself about feasibility, developing a common set of management information, narrowing the cost and schedule changes as the program goes on, make decisions on the scope and available funding, taking into the trade-offs between costs and benefits, account for limitations of cost benchmarking information, be realistic about the cost, set cost and schedule changes to reflect uncertainty. Although the report mentions the explicit government objectives for this program, it does not assess how current and different trajectories will affect those outcomes. Furthermore, the report directly declines to assess value for money, which is implicitly the measure of how well the process from money to inputs to outputs will result in stated outcomes. As such, the Now report is best thought of as an economy and efficiency focused set of findings and sound recommendations.
Now we can move to the PAG hearing. Since the topic of the discussion is extremely complex, just a few members of the committee took the floor more actively, and this is certainly positively related to their political careers and past experiences. The more informed, the more active. The chair, who has a great experience with PAG, she's been member since 2011 and gets briefed by the Now, is among these. In addition, Sir Clifton Brown and Sir Jackin are both very active. They're very experienced politicians and both have experience with transport and scrutiny activities. Finally, a very active MP is Mr. Merriman, who is not a member of the PAG, but he is a guest as the chair of the Transport Select Committee, which he has been a member of since 2015. Finally, the witnesses are all experts on the HS2 program. During the hearing, different topics are touched upon. The most stressed during the entire session is lack of transparency from the department and HS2 limited toward the PAG and the Parliament. Transparency and availability of information are essential for the PAG to exert its scrutiny function. It cannot scrutinize something it is not informed about. The MPs lament that crucial information has been arbitrarily omitted by the Department for Transport and HS2 Limited. In particular, HS2 Limited informed through a breach letter the department that it would have not delivered the program with a budget or schedule. However, the department did not share this information with the PAC during the previous session held in May 2019. HS2 Limited is accused of not including in its July 2019 annual report any mention to delays and cost overruns. The MPs are also extremely concerned with cost and time overruns and want to be sure that the new estimates presented are going to be respected. Unfortunately, it is particularly difficult for them to investigate deeply the answers provided by the witnesses because of the topic complexity. More than once, they asked the level of confidence that the witnesses have on the new cost and schedule estimates and they try to investigate on what additional resources the measure are based relatively to the unmet previous estimates. As representatives of the Parliament, which grants the money on behalf of taxpayers, the PAC members are interested in ensuring that there is not going to be any further increase in the budget needed to complete the project. Strongly related to the issue of cost overruns is the Euston station. Indeed, as the London terminal of the HS2 network, Euston will have a significant and representative value. In addition, the station represents an extremely complex part of the entire HS2 program and it has been allocated a conspicuous amount of resources. General information is asked on delivering times as well as the integration of the station with the London tube system. However, the final design of the station has not been formalized yet, and this makes it very difficult for the MPs to put the witnesses on the spot on this topic. Finally, the discussion is focused on the skills that both the department and HS2 Limited have developed and whether there is going to be any skills gap in the future. MPs want to have more information about the actions undertaken by HS2 Limited to ensure the correct set of skills and capabilities and whether the department is monitoring them. Concerns are expressed about the high turnover of civil servants across different departments. In conclusion, the MPs want to be sure that a feedback mechanism is employed during the project implementation. It is fundamental to take in very high consideration the lessons learned from the initial phases and mistakes. Generally speaking, the witnesses' responses during the entire session really leave the room for a back and forth discussion. In many occasions, as it is for the case of transparency, they stick with bureaucratic procedures and the ambiguous communication on not formalized results. They answer more technical questions, providing enough details. However, this may make hard for the MPs to reply as they do not have consistent ground to do so. The PAC hearing is significantly different from the previously examined NOW report in the sense that it introduces the topic of transparency. This is evidence of the political nature of the PAC. Indeed, transparency is a crucial element for accountability and then is an essential tool for the job of the committee. Transparency is important over all phases of the program and it anticipates any analysis on inputs, outputs, or outcomes. Transparency is the bridge between the budget, which has been approved, and the implementation of the project. Similarly to the NOW report, the PAC focuses on cost overruns and management capabilities. These are essentially input questions as the costs represent the different ingredients for the HS2 implementation and the capabilities are fundamental for delivering outputs. Outputs are also part of the PAC discussion. Indeed, user session is one of the major outputs of the HS2 program in terms of cost and salience. The discussion cannot focus on the value for money of the station, as the NOW pointed out, and is merely focused on the generality of the project development. As in the NOW report, the extent of the analysis is limited to the economy and the efficiency of the project. Cost overruns and schedule concerns are part of an economic evaluation, and although in less details and less deep examination relatively to the NOW report, they are part of the hearing's discussion. Management capacity and the lessons learned can be included in an efficiency analysis. Indeed, they are part of the transformation of inputs into outputs. Effectiveness cannot be truly reported as the complexity of estimating and assessing the outcomes is very high. However, there is some mentions to outcomes during the hearing, like climate change impact and the impact on the cost of London transportation for citizens, even though these are just summary questions and lack of any room to obtain exhaustive details.
We now move to the government's response to the PAC recommendations. Each recommendation is explored in detail and then analyzed. In October 2021, a little more than 6 months after the PAC meeting, the government released a response to the conclusions and recommendations put forth by the committee. This document stated that the government accepted each of the conclusions drawn and would comply with the recommendations with a brief explanation of the same. In their document, the PAC made 7 highly specific recommendations to the government regarding the current status and work efficiency of the HS2 project. These recommendations covered issues in the project regarding transparency, accountability, project management, and outcomes. Shown here are the conclusions drawn by the PAC regarding the current state of HS2. The government states that it accepts all of these conclusions. We clustered our analysis regarding the effectiveness of the recommendations around two central themes: transparency and accountability, and efficiency in the process. Under transparency, we examined recommendations 1 and 2. The committee indicated in no uncertain terms that the Department of Transport and HS2 had been negligent in informing the public and the Parliament regarding cost and time overruns in the project. Recommendation 1 specifies that the department must develop protocols to ensure a realistic appraisal of the program's likelihood of delivering to budget and schedule, how it will keep Parliament informed of crucial milestones over the short to medium term to inform the timing of future scrutiny, and how it will report on the significant tasks to successful delivery. Recommendation 2 directs the government to publish its progress reports at regular intervals and leave no delay in informing the Parliament about cost and time overruns. We recognize that these recommendations are a primary mechanism to increase transparency and accountability of the program. There is better public information. A ministerial task force is to be formed to provide additional oversight to the project's completion progress. It is noteworthy that although the PAC decides reasonably clear goals for the government, it does so without a level of granularity or attaching any sanctions. The PAC also depends on the media to broadcast these recommendations and generate public awareness, therefore implementing a quasi-social audit system to ensure the department is pressured into being more transparent. However, the lack of sanctions and the overall lack of media coverage means that the department has no obligation to follow through. Recommendations 3 through 7 address the matters of how efficiently the program itself is being run. We use a framework of assessing economy, efficiency, and effectiveness to turn the budget into inputs, inputs into outputs, and outputs into outcomes. Recommendation 3 addresses the skills and capabilities of the staff of the DFT and HS2 Limited. It mentions 3 key recommendations. First, a robust plan to ensure oversight on the civil and construction works through to completion. Second, a report to indicate gaps in the capacity of DFT with strategies for rectification. And third, a plan to refresh its skills strategy as the program proceeds. Recommendation 3 ties with the economy and efficiency aspects of output conversion, with the PAC nudging the department to be more efficient in converting its budget into input and therefore into output as economically as possible. While there are no sanctions to these recommendations, the department has set up a task force to ensure skill and personnel management in the program. This recommendation is likely to bear fruit. Recommendation 4 addresses a major deliverable, that is Euston Station. The PAC directs the government to report, within 6 months, strategies for completing the infrastructure changes to the station. The future of this recommendation remains uncertain. The department has not provided the PAC with the requisite report, despite the 6-month deadline. The department has merely made promises for more regular updates. There is no fundamental change in the way they work, nor are there any consequences to underperforming. Recommendations 5 and 7 are concerned with securing future development in HS2 from the pitfalls faced by the government in Phase 1 so far. On that note, the PAC directs the department to compile a lessons learned report for the Phase 1 project, as well as indicative reports for Phases 2A and 2B. This includes a requirement from the department to ensure that the Parliament is provided with sufficient cost, information, and time to enable effective scrutiny and decision-making on current and future high-speed railway-related legislation. Our analysis suggests that this is likely to succeed. There has been some action on part of the government in implementing a lessons learned approach from Phase A of the project. They have adopted a rigorous cross-functional approach to assess the direct and indirect costs of proposed changes. Partial effort into program integration has been made, with a follow-up report due in 3 months. Recommendation 6 is concerned with integration of the HS2 system with the currently existing rail systems in the UK. We see this as an effort by the PAC to ensure that the intended outcomes from the program are implemented well. The department is to provide a report on their plans for horizontal integration, as well as how they will work with other stakeholders to maximize the benefits of this program as a whole. We analyze that this is an effort to increase the effectiveness of the program, push outputs, which is the new rail service, into outcomes, which is better value for passengers, rail use, environmental efficiency, time, and others.
Now that we have seen the different scrutiny process over the HS2 project, let's analyze how media responded to those reports. In a nutshell, Media covered mostly the Prime Minister announces over the decisions on the project. The PAC hearing and the government response were mostly ignored by mainstream media. To illustrate this point, we created a chart in which we analyzed the number of mentions by media over time. The y-axis represents the relative value of mentions in media, while the logos try to describe who was reporting the event. Beginning in January 2020, questions regarding the feasibility of the project and cost estimation were salient. The now and the overkey reports were summoned mostly by independent or specialized media. The question at the time was if the government was going to continue with the project given the scoping definition and cost estimation difficulties. The event that got most of the attention of all time during the year was the green light for continuing by Boris Johnson on the 11th of February. It was replicated in most mainstream and specialized media. However, the PAC hearing and the government response were mostly neglected by mainstream media. The PAC hearing was mentioned in portals that are mostly followed by industry experts or simply railroad anoraks. The government response was ignored. This is not surprising given the low impact that the PAC hearing had over the project itself. Finally, the last couple of months, the construction of the project and the concerns raised by some groups were the trending topics. Experts such as the Infrastructure Project Authority and environmental groups have questioned the feasibility and consequences of the project. More recently, the COVID-19 restrictions have arisen doubts on the need of such a gigantic infrastructure monster given the reductions in commuting and the overall change in consumer behavior. Let's end this presentation putting all together. Overall, the HS2 project has been slowly shifting from a source of national pride to lack of project management capacity, plummeting government credibility. The project promised the most effective form of rail transport in Europe, connecting London to the Midlands and Scotland. However, problems in input estimation and output scoping has taken the front seat on all scrutiny phases. The Now report was pivotal to unveil the scoping miscalculation by the HS2 team. The report stated that problems were caused by using wrong benchmarks, promising unrealistic cost savings, and failure to account for risk uncertainty. The report also raised doubts on technical capacity by the team. Mostly, economic and efficiency aspects were covered by the report. As Tony explained before, outcomes were deliberately left aside given the high uncertainty of the scope. As a result, there was a high level of uncertainty on whether the project could be delivered the outputs given the current resources. But an additional player came to the field. The government was under pressure to take decisions on the project continuity. Suspecting the results of an external audit, the Now report, and in order to take effort-based decisions, the government hired the Overkey report. This report was mandated by the Prime Minister to assess if the project should continue and how. Based on the positive results and technical suggestions, Boris Johnson announced the green light of the project in February 2020. This was one of the reasons why the PAC hearing had marginal influence on the decision-making of the project. The PAC hearing focused mainly on the transparency of the HS2 team to provide information about the project. Questions about inputs and outputs were sharp and detailed, but the answers were vague and elusive. Outputs were discussed in detail, such as Euston Station example, which was salient in every step of the scrutiny process. Some marginal mentions on outcomes were made, but they sat on the backseat. Finally, as Mihir showed to us, the government response accepted all the recommendations, it could be argued accusations, by the Parliament Committee. It mostly addressed information issues, and according to the response, all reports were sent to the committee members. It mostly addressed output estimations and transparency. Differently from the High Speed 2 project, this presentation has reached its final stop. We began our journey with the now report raising concerns about the feasibility of constructing a £56 billion project by 2032. Now, in December 2020, the government pushed to continue this project with the new estimates of 106 billion, ending between 2035 and 2040. Thank you so much for your attention. Now we open the floor for burning questions as in the PAC hearing.